As Biden's poll numbers collapse, Democrats continue to hit the panic button, and one of their new tactics is, in order to preserve democracy and make sure all Americans can participate, one theory is they can do that by removing a candidate from the ballots. Of course, we're talking about Donald Trump. The 14th Amendment, we have already here covered some other lawsuits we called first drafts here. Florida man filed a lawsuit that was immediately dismissed, filled with typos, kind of a bunch of nonsense arguments, but it was step one, right? They're taking shots on goal right now to try to develop these arguments, and they just need one state to fall. If they can get Trump removed from one ballot in one state, it's going to be persuasive precedent for other states to do the same thing. It'll be like a dominoes series of falls from all of the lefty secretaries of states and board of electors in various localities. But why are they doing this? Now, we're going to go through this. It's a new lawsuit filed in Colorado. It's 115 pages, a lot more serious than the last one. We're going to go through it. Joe Biden is such a legitimate to the American people. Why do they have to do like Barack Obama did when his Senate race and get his opponents thrown off the ballot? Why is Joe trying to do this? Well, this is why. His poll numbers are in the toilet. CNN is even recognizing this, and this is kind of a bloodbath from them on this clip. And this is curious because we also have juxtaposed with this new revelation from CNN. They're realizing, hey, nobody really likes Joe or the state of the country. It's kind of a dumpster fire here. They're saying to themselves, maybe something needs to change. Maybe Kamala's waiting in the wings. She's already been hitting the media circuit saying, I'm ready and prepared. I know a lot about buses and USB ports, so I'm prepared to lead America. And she's talking all sorts of nonsense. We also have Dr. Jill Biden, who's a little bit sickly sick over there. Joe Biden's walking out of rooms, just like, where am I at today? And so maybe they're doing the old Indiana Jones, swapping that golden skull out for a new candidate. But this is CNN dropping the bomb.
We have brand new CNN polling this morning, and the numbers are rough for President Biden. They could spell trouble for Democrats and the president's hopes for re-election in 2024. Still early, but Biden's approval rating has sunk to 39%. Nearly 60% of voters think Biden's policies are making the economy worse. Close to 70% Democrats want somebody else to run for president. And the president's approval among Democratic voters, that's slipping.
Yeah, these are all very troubling for the White House. This new CNN poll shows no clear winner between President Biden and nearly all of the leading Republican presidential candidates.
That's brutal for them. Look.
It's in these theoretical matchups, except for Nikki Haley, who leads President Biden by 6 points. Donald Trump, 1 point ahead of Biden. This all comes just hours before President Biden.
Look at those numbers, just to pause on those. Haley's up 6 points. Trump's up 1. DeSantis is tied. Pence beats Biden by 2 points. Scott beats Biden by 2 points. Ramaswamy loses, and Christie wins. Even Christie wins. 44 to 42%. So this is just, brutal. And basically saying anybody can win. So Nikki Haley better be very careful because she's about to be indicted. If something like that were to happen, she's next on the chopping block. But I still, don't think obviously that's going to happen. I think that Trump is far and away ahead. But my point is, these are bad numbers for them. They are not going to be happy about this. And even CNN is calling it out now.
Ahead of Biden. This all comes just hours before President Biden heads off on a big foreign trip to meet with world leaders at the G20 summit in India.
Well, we want to get straight to CNN political director David Chalian to break down all of this new polling. And we always say a poll is a snapshot, but this is a snapshot that is ugly on several fronts for President Biden. What do Americans think about how he's handling his job right now, Dave?
Yeah, there's no doubt about this. We're 14 months away from his re-election effort here when Election Day happens, Phil, and this is a rough snapshot. You noted his approval rating is at 39%. 61% of Americans disapprove. This is our brand new poll conducted by SSRS. Look at that approval number over time. Since the spring, he's been hanging out in this very low, troubling approval rating for him, and it really has not fluctuated all that much. Take a look by party. You noted among Democrats, his approval rating is down a bit from where it was in July. He's at 74% among his own party faithful. Independents holding troublingly low for the president at 36%, obviously single digits among Republicans. And look at how Biden stacks up against all of his modern era predecessors at this point in their presidency. I'm just going to draw a line here to show us he's hanging out in this category with Trump and Carter. Something about Trump and Carter? They lost their re-election efforts.
All right. So a couple things. Who knows if these polls are accurate or not, right? They could just be making up numbers. I think generally most polls are just kind of shots in the dark, and they're just numbers to talk about. There's a whole industry about it. I think you can doubt them. You can believe them. You can use them for whatever you want to use them for. I do think that they're interesting to watch trends, right? To see, maybe the same people who were measuring the same things are watching some trends. They're watching things go up or things go down. I don't necessarily know if who's above what or what the jockeying, if that all really matters, but stuff moves, right? Stuff stuff goes up, big movements, and things go down in big movements, and you can watch the trends. Now, the other thing with polls is they are kind of push polls, right? They kind of want to program you a certain way. So now CNN's coming out and saying, oh, Nikki Haley, wow, she's on top. And it's like, hey, all the war people, all the endless World War III psychos. Yeah, sure, Nikki Haley now. She's going to be the next great thing to, oust Donald Trump because Ron DeSantis couldn't do it. So they're going to slot somebody else in. All the donors leave Ron. They all go over to Nikki Haley. The media takes the poll, starts shoving it down everybody's gullet to try to astroturf some support for whomever they want. So, it's the same thing here, but it's not just on the Republican side. It's also on the Democrat side. We can take a look and say, well, maybe they're doing the same thing. Maybe they're trying to signal to a bunch of people that Joe Biden's got to go, right? These numbers are in the dump and it is time. He's going to lose to everybody. So make sure he has a COVID complication or something and they give him the old boot. And then maybe that opens up the primary. Kamala Harris runs and other people jump in. The party selects the nominee at the Democratic convention sometime in August. And then we wake up, we've got Michelle Obama or a Gavin Newsom.
And that, I think, begs the question, David, about the just mood in general of the country. Did we get numbers on that?
We did, Poppy, and it's a sour mood out there. It really is, which is hard news for an incumbent. Only 30% of Americans think things are going well in the country. 7 in 10 Americans say they're going badly. You noted earlier, 58% of Americans say that Joe Biden's policies have worsened economic conditions. That's a majority there. This is why you hear him talking about Bidenomics all the time and trying to get that number lower.
It makes you think.
Which is a dumb thing to do because he's just labeling what everybody's feeling. Everybody's going, this kind of sucks. Inflation, groceries, cost of living, gas prices, everything's going up. And people are like wondering, why is this happening? And Joe Biden's like, I know, Bidenomics. I know, that's why. Thanks for labeling it for us.
Was it right for them to label it Bidenomics?
Right. He's got to convince Americans that he's actually improving the economy. You see a majority thinks he's worsened it. And look at these attributes. He doesn't have majority support on any of them. 45% say cares about people like you. A third of Americans say proud to have as a president. And down here, 28% of Americans only say he inspires confidence.
So, David, this is going to naturally bring forth the Bidenism of don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. What does that look like for him?
Have you heard that before, Phil?
Yeah,
exactly. So first, let's look among Democrats here. Okay, this is among Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents.
2/3.
This number is troubling. A third of Democrats want Joe Biden as the nominee. Nearly 2/3 of his own fellow partisans would like a different candidate. And what is the concern here? We asked an open-ended question. What is your biggest concern about Biden as a presidential candidate? 49% of Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents say age. 7% mental sharpness. 7% say health. And then we brought it out beyond Democrats, and we asked everyone, are you seriously concerned that Biden's age might negatively affect his ability to serve another full term? 3/4 of Americans seriously concerned about that. Nearly 3/4 of Americans seriously concerned that it negatively impacts his mental and physical competence. 68% concerned that he understands actually what the concerns are of the next generation.
Just pause on how significant those numbers are for a moment, David.
They're giant.
Yeah,
this is Democrats?
No, this is everyone. This is
Okay.
everyone. But this is what he's entering into a re-election campaign. This is sort of the backdrop to that. So
it's like, even if these polls, are like off, let's say the polls are off by 10%. Let's say the polls are off by 20%. Okay. Okay, so what? All right, they're off by 20%. It's like, well, all right, well, that's still a lot of people. Over half the country still think he's incapable of doing this, right? So the trends are just insane. Ability to serve a full term is, and he's got another year, really, before people really start voting, more or less.
He's entering into a re-election campaign. This is sort of the backdrop to that. So that explains, when we look at these hypothetical matchups against the Republican candidates, why Joe Biden, everything we just said, this is why it's a margin of error race, except, as you noted, for one candidate, Nikki Haley, the only Republican who's actually besting him outside the margin of error, 49 to 43. Everybody else here is in a margin of error race.
Well, there you go. I guess we better just nominate Nikki Haley, and then we can have endless war for all eternity. But, it is a curious thing to see that CNN is actually covering this way, right? And that was like 4 minutes there of them just obliterating Joe Biden day after day, minute after minute. And you can see the numbers are brutal. And is anything going to change anytime soon? Is the economy going to come roaring back? I don't think so. Is Putin going to surrender and we're all going to have global bliss, eternal peace or something like that? And I don't think so. And so when I see stuff like this, I feel like it's programming, right? This is less reporting than it is a signal to everybody else out there. Hey, our guy is going to lose. All right. So start organizing accordingly. And maybe they're already planning for it. I would presume that they are. So we are going to take a look at this lawsuit, but this is Adam Schiff saying this is totally legitimate. Removal of Donald Trump is perfect. Like, we need this to happen because Joe Biden cannot win, basically, against him or really anybody else, but they want Trump to be the nominee. Okay, here's their plan. Trump is going to win the primary, so the party will nominate him, and then they will keep him off the ballot. So they're going to have two things, right? They're going to have Trump and a removal attempt, and they're going to try to do it. This is Jen Psaki and Shifty talking about it.
There's an argument circulating about whether the 14th Amendment that prohibits anyone, quote, engaged in insurrection or rebellion from holding public office bars Trump from running for president. Now, this hasn't been tested in our system before.
Because you guys just made it up.
What is your thought on whether that's a valid argument?
Because you just made it up. It's like he made up a lot of
I think it is a valid argument. You know, the 14th Amendment, Section 3 is pretty clear. If you engage in acts of insurrection or rebellion against the government, or you give aid and comfort to those who do, you are disqualified from running.
It says that?
It doesn't require that you be convicted of insurrection. It just requires that you have engaged in these acts. It's a disqualification from holding office again. And it fits Donald Trump to a T.
Amazing.
I think this will be tested when his Secretary of State either refuses to put him on the ballot or puts him on the ballot and is challenged by a litigant. I would imagine it will go up to the Supreme Court, and that's the big question mark through all of this, which is what will the Supreme Court do? There are prominent constitutional scholars as well as prominent progressive scholars who believe that he should be disqualified, but will the court take that step? Ultimately, only time will tell, but I do think it is a very legitimate issue. By the clear terms of the 14th Amendment, he should be disqualified from holding office.
All right, so these are the same people that lecture us about democracy and about insurrection and, you know, participating in all of the elections. And don't you dare disenfranchise people from voting. If you ask for a signature or an ID, that's racist and blah, 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 blah. But that's all to enfranchise people to participate. Unless it's participating for Trump, then in which case we don't really want you to participate at all. In fact, we'll just kind of, you know, if it's a Trump-type candidate, we'll just kind of wreck the election on election day, and then you can just deal with it. So Schiff is supporting others. These are Colorado Republicans who are now filing this, and this is a pretty serious one. This one's out of the district court. This is a state level case filed for the district court, county and city of Denver, Colorado. This is not a federal case, right? So this is a different jurisdiction. Filed September 6th. You see 115 pages. Now, we're not going to go through the full thing. We'll just hit some of the highlights before we get some reaction from Trump's defense team. But here you see we've got the petitioners. This person, Norma Anderson, Michelle, Claudine, Krista, Kathy, Christopher Castilian. These are the people making the lawsuit. Responding is the Colorado Secretary of State. Her name is Jenna Griswold, and Donald Trump. And remember, in 2020, we covered a lot of litigation, a lot of pre-election litigation, and it was a lot of it very troubling, because what would happen would be certain groups, in many cases, it was Mark Elias and people like the Democracy Docket, who would file a lawsuit against the Secretary of State, but in many cases, it was a friendly Secretary of State. So it kind of feels like it's an adversarial lawsuit, like there's an actual versus here. But in some cases, and I'm not saying that this is the one here, but we learned it later, is that, you know, these people have the same end game as the Secretary of State. So for example, in Michigan, I think we'll see this exact same thing. We've got Jocelyn Benson in Michigan, who is in my opinion, a rabid anti-Trumper, does not want Trump to win at all. And so she'll do anything she can to make that happen. Now, if she gets sued by a friendly group, and, you know, she's going to put up a fight, but then they'll negotiate a settlement that enables their end game. So it's kind of the same thing happening here. It's almost like it doesn't even matter sometimes what the actual end game of the suit is. If there's a settlement, if Jenna Griswold and these people settle something, you know, for whatever reason, then that might cause some consequences. And, you know, I'm not sure that that's going to happen here or not. I'm just proffering some alternatives. So here we've got the attorneys who are filing on behalf of the people filing the lawsuit. They've redacted their addresses and contact information, but they come from an organization called the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. Donald Sherman, Nicholas Suss, Jonathan Mayer, and others, all making the suit. So we've got a table of contents. Now, remember the last lawsuit that we read through brought by Florida Man, which was dismissed pretty quickly. This one's a lot more substantive, right? We've got an actual table of contents. We've got a factual background. We've got a whole separate grouping of sections, and they're making significant arguments in 100 pages plus. So here is what we see. Now, these people, Norma Anderson, Michelle Priola, Claudine, Krista, Christopher, and so on, they are eligible Colorado electors. They bring the action under Colorado law to challenge the listing of Trump as a candidate on the presidential primary ballot and any future election ballots. They say Trump is disqualified based on the 14th Amendment, and they want this court to stop the secretary, Jenna Griswold, from taking any action that would allow him to get on the ballot. They're asking for an expedited hearing on this motion. So a lot more serious, right? This feels even just more substantive based on how it is assembled. Donald Trump Trump, they say, tried to overthrow the election, and he sought to subvert our Constitution. He incited, now we're always looking for what is the triggering action that just makes this newly found and newly discovered provision of the Constitution self-executing. How did that work? He incited, exacerbated, and otherwise engaged in a violent insurrection, even though he's never been charged with this. This is a crime. I believe it's 2383. And that at the United States Capitol by a mob who believed that they were following his orders and refused to protect the Capitol and call off the mob for nearly 3 hours, right? And that's the other trigger. They're saying, well, if he didn't actually cause the violent insurrection or lead an insurrection, since they haven't been charged, nobody's been charged with insurrection, they can't really hit him on that. So they say he failed to call them off, which is like a negligence thing. Like he should have done something differently. You know, the CEO of a company, like a safe company, should have responded differently than they have. Trump's efforts, they say, to overturn the election and interfere with the peaceful transfer of power were part of an insurrection. Again, just decided by whomever is making the decision against the Constitution. Because Trump took these actions after he swore an oath to the Constitution, this 14th Amendment prohibits him from being on the ballot. So we bring this action now to protect the rights of the Republican and independent voters to participate. They say the Civil War, after the Civil War, we had the 14th Amendment, and it says that it bars from office any person who swore a, quote, oath to support the Constitution of the United States as a federal or state officer, and then engaged in insurrection or gave aid and comfort to the enemies thereof. Like other constitutional qualifications, and here's what they just say: if you're under the age 35, if you're not a citizen, not naturalized, or a natural-born citizen, you're not eligible to run. So they say that this is just their decision. Neither the text nor precedent, which there isn't any, require a criminal conviction for insurrection or any other offense to be a judge, right? They're saying that you don't need a conviction. Just the fact that this thing happened, and look at these people. Oh, it's so gross to watch how this happens. They're referencing these two idiots, okay? Judge Ludwig, who is like, he talks as slow as molasses, and Lawrence Tribe, who is a lefty propagandist lawyer who just lives on MSNBC. So they're referencing their stupid piece, which we read through here. We talked about this. They published this piece out of, they just made it up. August 19th, 2023, they discovered this new provision. And Judge Ludwig even made the same thing. He says, yeah, I just learned about this. It's incredible. It's self-executing. Amazing. Section 3, they say, is a measure of self-defense designed to preserve and protect American democracy. And they're citing a congressional session from 1866, which would have been after the Civil War, when they're debating the 14th Amendment. They're having these sessions. He's saying, this is what Section 3 is meant to be. They're going back, in other words, to what's called legislative history, to dig into what created the 14th Amendment. They say it embodies the 14th Amendment's framers' recognition of the grave threat that an insurrection could harm our union. And they're citing some stuff. The idea being that one who has taken an oath to support the Constitution and violated it ought to be excluded from taking it again. Well, that's the thing, is somebody's got to make sure that that is an actual violation, a determination of a violation. You don't just get to make that up and decide. We already had an impeachment, second time. That didn't lead to anything. And we've got criminal charges for things that are not insurrection that are working their way through the courts right now. And maybe they'll charge him with insurrection. Maybe that will come up at some point, but it has not yet. They say Donald Trump has failed this test. 4 years after taking the oath to preserve and protect and defend under the Constitution, Trump tried to overthrow the results of the 2020 election, which is all not true. He was investigating the results and challenging the results, which, in my opinion, he had the absolute lawful right to do and was justified in doing it, leading to a violent insurrection at the Capitol to stop the lawful transfer of power to his successors, their claim. By instigating the unprecedented assault on American constitutional order, this is a red meat for the Democrats. This is blue soy, is what it is. And they just love it because, like, think about this landing up in front of Judge Chutkan's courtroom. Unprecedented assault on American constitutional order. Chutkan's like, oh gosh. Trump violated his oath and disqualified himself under the 14th Amendment, including the office of the presidency. So you see here, they're going to walk us through. They're saying Trump swore an oath. Here's a photo. But then Trump insurrected the Capitol in the same phrase. The core facts, they argue, demonstrating Trump's disqualification are a matter of public record. They say he dishonestly and unlawfully tried to overturn the election. He said it will be wild when you show up there, and they love that phrase, will be wild, for a protest. Among those that Trump mobilized were violent extremists, including those he told to stand back and stand by. Others were triggered when he said the word rigged and that the election was stolen from them, which it was. Ask the CIA, 51 people. Ask the censors who silenced our ability to participate. We did not have a free and fair election. They did not even allow us to share tweets because the CIA and the FBI were putting pressure on them with fake information. They knew it was all true. Once his supporters were assembled at the White House, Trump repeated the incendiary incendiary lie and told him to fight like hell to stop the steal. Stop Vice President Pence and Congress from lawfully stopping them. And the theory was that Mike Pence was just going to say, we need an investigation. And we already had Ted Cruz, who was there, calling for a pause so that they could have a debate about all of this. But they didn't want that to happen. They didn't want anybody looking into any of this, which is why they allowed the Capitol building to be overran. Before January 6th, Trump was repeatedly told by lawyers that Pence could not lawfully overturn the election. He was also told by other lawyers who said he could. Trump's mob, they say, went to the Capitol, blah, blah, blah. We've got all the photographs. It was only after 3 hours. It feels like Liz Cheney's writing this. Okay, what's the argument now? Racism and white supremacy. Wow. The same ideologies that led to the Civil War. You see where this is going? Oh my gosh. So this is basically a civil war, in other words. At January 6th, ahead of January 6th, Trump and his allies directed their false claims, and they were targeting large black populations, and they were specifically identifying urban areas in Detroit, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Atlanta, and they were intimidating officials to invalidate the votes of millions of black Americans. This means that we're in a civil war again. And this is, January 6th is analogous exactly to the Civil War because they're trying to disenfranchise black workers. They falsely accused black election workers of ballot tampering, which is, I guess, like slavery, causing them to face threats of lynchings and other racialized violence. Wow. So you can't question what's happening in election polling places lest you are going to be supporting lynchings and racialized violence. And on January 6th, neo-Confederates and neo-Nazis were among the first in Trump's mob to breach the Capitol building. Yeah, along with Ray Epps, who was never charged, who admitted he went in. And so they just are, cherry picking whatever they want. So voluminous public evidence and authorities, they say here, although Section 3 disqualification does not require a criminal conviction, you can just do it on your own, or impeachment, they say a federal grand jury has in fact indicted Trump on 4 criminal counts related to his effort to subvert the election. And so they're going to latch onto all of those. Those are the charges that we're familiar with. Georgia indicted him too. House of Representatives, they say a bipartisan majority, impeached Trump for incitement of insurrection. And so maybe they're going to say that's enough, right? Just the House impeachment, but not the conviction. And a bipartisan majority of the Senate voted to convict him, with several senators voting against the conviction and it not reaching the 2/3 majority. So even though he wasn't actually removed or convicted in the Senate, they're still saying the majority voted against him. And the people who voted against him said that the Senate lacked jurisdiction to try a former president, right? So they didn't really exonerate him. They just came up with a technicality. The bipartisan January 6th committee, which was, basically one-sided. Technically, it had Liz Cheney and crying Adam Kinzinger on there, but it was supposed to have 5 Republicans and it never did. The J6 committee and the numerous federal judges have likewise recognized Trump's central role in the insurrection. Courts have disqualified other officials under the 14th Amendment who played less substantial roles. This has happened to Couy Griffin, right? We've talked about Couy on this channel several times. They took him off the ballot. Look, a former New Mexico County commissioner who was a grassroots mobilizer, who was a member on January 6th but did not commit violent acts, they say, or breach the building, and Kenneth Worthy, who served as a sheriff. If these individuals were disqualified, then surely Trump's does as well, right? So they're going to say that this has happened before, and so you have the right to do this. Trump has publicly affirmed, they say, his disloyalty to the Constitution. He hangs out with insurrectionists, and he posts mean truths. They say Trump is precisely the threat to American democracy that the 14th Amendment framers had in mind when they adopted this. We've been saying this for a long time now. They're saying he's going to do it again. They're going to say that this is going to happen literally again. That if we don't remove him, he's going to insurrect the country again. If we don't convict him, it's all going to happen over. Because Trump swore an oath to preserve and protect and then engaged in an insurrection, he's disqualified. Despite this disqualification, he's currently a candidate. The secretary has the power and the duty to exclude ineligible candidates from the ballot. But the secretary has not done so here. And based on historical practice, they're not going to independently investigate this absent a judicial order. So, Your Honor, due to Trump's candidacy combined with his constitutional ineligibility, the secretary is about to commit by putting him on the ballot. We've got to file this lawsuit. There is an urgent public interest in promptly resolving whether Trump is eligible. And accordingly, we seek a declaratory order finding Trump is constitutionally disqualified from the public office under the 14th Amendment and stopping the Colorado secretary from granting Trump access to the ballot for the primary or any other election. And all you need is one judge, right? This is obviously unconstitutional, but all you need is one judge somewhere to say, gosh, that sounds right. And I think you're right. I'd like to get appointed to higher judgeship or higher entire office or whatever. And I would like to just go ahead and make sure this never happens again. They say at page 103, here's what they're asking the court for: an expedited hearing on this petition declaring that Trump is unconstitutional, is disqualified under the 14th Amendment, and is constitutionally ineligible to appear on any Colorado ballot, saying that any action by the Secretary of Colorado allowing Trump onto the ballot would be improper under Colorado law and would be a wrongful act. So just saying, hey, Secretary, if you do this, you're in trouble. They want to enjoin Colorado, the Secretary, from taking any action that would allow him to show up on the primaries or the generals, and they also want to be awarded attorney's fees. Signed by Mario Nicolai, Martha Tierney, Eric Olson, Nicholas Sherman, and Mikhail Suss, which is sus. Jonathan Mayer also signing off on this from the crew. Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, CREW. Now this, as we can see here, this is a much more serious motion. The last time we were listening to Florida Man and his lawsuit, we were kind of laughing at that. This is a little bit of a different deal. And again, it doesn't really matter whether it's constitutional or not, okay? The judges just do whatever they want in this new lawfare game that we're in. They don't care if you don't have time to read 12.5 million pages of documents. Who cares if there's 130 witnesses that they're going to call in Georgia and you need, 3 months to prepare for that? They just don't care. It's all about the end game, and they need fake excuses and legal justifications to do this stuff. And this gives plenty of them, and they're going to just latch onto it, and it builds, it snowballs. So do you see how it works? Lawrence Tribe and Ludwig, they create this stupid theory. They start pitching it on MSNBC. Asa Hutchinson picks it up. Chris Christie picks it up. It starts to grow. The seeds are planted. And we get a lawsuit. Then we get a couple rulings. Then we get a couple precedents. Boom. The rest of it just goes on. And I'm concerned about this. I really think that this is going to be a problem unless the Supreme Court says something about this. And eventually, I think that they probably will have no choice but to do that. But for whatever reason, Trump's team, I don't think is ultimately too worried about it. This is what Lindsey Halligan, Trump's lawyer, said about it.
No, it's according to, I think it's Judge Ludwig and Lawrence Tribe. Those are the two people that are pushing this. According to them, one single individual has standing to challenge whether another individual is qualified to hold public office. The framers of our Constitution would have never, ever, ever wanted that. So I don't think that's going.
I hear that line a lot. I've been hearing a lot of people say that. I think I heard Alan Dershowitz say that too. And I'm like, guys, that's a nice concept, but we're not playing in that world anymore. All right. The judges don't care a crap about the founding framers of our Constitution. They don't care at all. They just do whatever they want to do. We've got a lot of people sitting in custody to attest to that fact today.
Anywhere. I know yesterday, Jack Smith filed a complaint in the January 6th case alleging that Donald Trump's truth posts are potentially tainting the jury pool. Well, I think this 14th Amendment stuff is potentially tainting the jury pool. I think the January 6th committee, the fact that that was publicized for everyone to see and it was completely one-sided, that has potentially tainted the jury pool. And I know Congressman Gates knows all about that. The committee's 18th-month investigation is, I'm pretty sure, the most extensive probe in congressional history. And because it was done all behind closed doors, the full extent of what was collected is unknown. And so with all that millions and millions of pages of material,
10 Washington monuments.
How much of that material does Jack Smith or Fani Willis have?
Fanny.
And how much of that material has not been disclosed to President Trump? So there's a lot going on here.
Sure.
There is a lot going on there, Lindsey, and I think that is part of the strategy, right? They are just going after every possible angle they can. 4 indictments, probably going to be 5. They're going after all the alternate electors, anybody who's even in the Trump orbit, in the team, the GOP teams, right? All of the people in Michigan are under investigation, a bunch of people in Georgia, and they are chilling people from helping Trump. They are stopping lawyers from wanting to get in on the game. They are trying to censor people who are speaking out. They're trying to remove law licenses and things like this. It's all madness. They can tell that their side is losing. Their arguments are failing. Their cities are crumbling. New York City mayor wanted a sanctuary city. Now he's saying New York is done and destroyed and over. They can't install bus signs in San Francisco. Takes months to install even, a little pole. It's just a disaster. Everywhere you turn, they're failing. So what do? They start attacking the opposition because they have no arguments and no leadership. And Joe Biden's poll numbers are showing it. We're going to continue to cover, my friends.